Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time it is. I am just thankful you are here. So, guys, today is our last class on period 3. All right. So that means our final class on unit 6. Go ahead and just ignore these dates right now because I'm not entirely sure whether you're going to be getting your this lesson on the 24th and 25th, or we'll push it depending on when I give you a writing assignment. This all being said, I am so excited that we have made it to this point. Okay, we only have one more period left, and period 4 is a fun one. All right, we're going to talk about World War I, World War II, and the Cold War. That's kind of my jam, guys. But this is our last class on period 3, and so what we're going to do today is we're going to tie everything together. All right, we're going to look at the very beginning of period 3 when we talked about those Enlightenment and the revolutions, and we're going to take it all the way to imperialism and those consequences of industrialization. And so for this final class, I need you guys to understand one major thing. Let's take a look at this picture. All right, what do you see? Well, you see immigration going on in the 19th century, aka the 1800s. All right, and that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to look at how industrialization, it not only has serious consequences for the world in terms of imperialism, but it has consequences for the world because it makes everyone a little bit more interconnected. And people are going to start moving around the world interregionally. All right, you're going to see people who are born and bred in Ireland moving to the United States. You're going to see Chinese people born and bred in China moving to the United States. All right, you're going to see Italians born and bred in Italy moving to South America. All right, you're going to see Indians born and bred in India moving to Australia. All right, and this migration has serious consequences for the world. Well, we need to talk about that. We need to figure out why. Okay, and that's what we're going to be doing today. So, as I said, guys, last class on period 3, last class in unit 6. All right, we'll start with a quick meme for you, building on that thing that we learned about Belgium last class. Then we'll move into the final 2 topics of unit 6. And as a reminder, I need you guys to be working on those period 3 review guides, okay? I'm not sure when the test will be. I'm making this video over winter break. I have not decided yet, but you should be working on those period 3 review guides every single day. So go ahead and be working on that at the end of class. All right, and as usual, if you've missed class, email me for in-class work, okay? So let's start with those memes. Yeah, this is kind of a weird one, but I kind of like it. I think it really sums up the craziness that Belgium inflicted upon the Congo Free State. All right, I got another one for you. Yeah, wait till we talk about Hitler and Stalin and how Leopold kind of belongs on that same shelf with the 2 of them. All right, guys. So you don't have to write this down, although I strongly recommend that you do. But I do need you guys to think about period 3 for a minute. All right. You might remember that when we started period 3, I told you that both period 2 and period 3 are kind of like the meat and potatoes of the AP World History exam. All right. You're going to see a lot more questions about period 2 and period 3. Now, I know period 2 is short, but you can't really have period 2. You can't really have period 3 without period 2. Remember, think about those early global empires. We talked about those trading post empires and how they were starting to kind of encroach in Asia and starting to take over some of those really powerful trading routes from period 1. All right. And in period 3, we kind of completely ended those major Asian trading routes. And we did so through this particular 150-year span. Now, I don't know, some of you guys are mathematicians, so remember, period 1 is 1200 to 1450, period 2 was 1450 to 1750, and period 3 was 1750 to 1900. So for you math whizzes, period 3 is going to be only 150 years. It's the shortest period we looked at up till now. But so much has happened in this remarkably short time frame. All right. So as you guys probably remember, we started with the Enlightenment. All right, we talked about the white dudes in coffee shops talking about natural rights, abolishing slavery, and ultimately what the government should do for the people. All right, and because of that Enlightenment, because of these high-minded ideas about what society should look like, you start to see revolutions. All right, we talked about the American Revolution, and we said it was in many ways the most conservative revolution. It was also the only revolution that would ultimately escape those cycles of revolutions. All right, we talked about the French Revolution. All right, heads rolling down the streets of Paris. All right, we talked about what happened after the French Revolution, in which you have, in which you have these Napoleon and taking over most of Europe. All right, the Haitian Revolution, Latin American revolutions. All right, you see people actually taking the ideas of the Enlightenment and putting them into practice. And what's crazy is that what really kind of rises out of all of this is another type of revolution. One that maybe isn't as violent, all right? One that fundamentally changes instead how things are made. So we talked a lot about the Industrial Revolution. We talked about the factory system. We talked about labor, right? I know a lot of you like child labor. We talked about how women and children are in those factories and what that actually means. All right, that change from this feudalistic society where if you are born a peasant, you will die a peasant, to all of a sudden this same lower class sort of idea in which if you are born a factory worker, you're likely to die a factory worker. Right, and how those people in those factories start to ask questions. All right, how is this economic system working for us? And that's when you see the rise of capitalism, communism, socialism, all right, and government interventions. All right. And then finally, when we got back from winter break, we did a whole unit on imperialism. We talked about the British Empire. We talked about how these powerful global empires are starting to run out of resources and need to find single exports from other places, which is why they start to take over other places through this process of imperialism. And now that we have all of those big themes kind of together, we're going to tie it with a nice little bow and send it off through the process of migration. All right. Now, you might think of migration as a good thing. People leave a place that doesn't suit them anymore and go to another place that suits them. And that's true. In a lot of the cases that we're going to look at today, migration is a good thing. But we're also going to look at involuntary migration, or migration that's not necessarily a good thing. Before we start all that, I do want to show you a quick video. I promise it's quick. All right, one thing I need you to understand about period 3, as we kind of tie it up and end it, is just how quickly the population explodes during this time. All right, so I'm going to show you a quick video, and I'm going to explain it once we get there. So give me just 1 second to change screens. All right, come on. Okay. All right, guys, so this is a really cool video. You can go ahead and watch it from the start. It starts from, year 1. But I'm gonna go ahead and start it at year 1500 right here. So it's during period 2. And as you can see, the way that they do this map is each one of those little yellow dots is 1 million people, okay? So we've just survived the plague. We've just finished up with Europeans forming those little trading routes along the Indian Ocean. We're just about to get to the transatlantic slave trade. And as you might remember, guys, the transatlantic slave trade, which is horrific in its own sense, also sort of harkens the Columbian Exchange. So go ahead and watch how the population changes from the year 1500 to the year 1900. All right, here we go. Year 1600. Year 1700. The start of period 3, guys. The Industrial Revolution has started. All right. Now, guys, I know this doesn't seem like a lot, but the population of the world has doubled during this time period. All right. And it's going to triple, quadruple in just during period 3. But I want you to take a look at what the world looks like at this time. All right. These little yellow balls, these are population centers. Huge amounts of populations in China and India, in Europe, even slowly here in the United States. All right. And so that is what's going to happen with modern technology, medicine, all right, and the Columbian Exchange, this new food production, okay? So I'm going to go back to my PowerPoint. Just give me 1 second, guys. All right, so I hope that really helped you guys. I think it's really worth noting that the population growth really takes off during period 3. And that, again, is all because of some things like industrial food production. So go ahead and start taking notes, guys. Let's talk about why the population is growing so rapidly, okay? At this point, all right, after period 2, the Columbian Exchange has been occurring for over 300 years. So think about what we talked about in period 2. Things like potatoes, wheat, corn, all of this important food is now being exchanged across the Atlantic Ocean, across the world. And after 300 years, humans are starting to figure out the proper equipment to really farm this stuff, okay? This might surprise you, but during this time, we actually have tractors, all right? You know, very crude versions of what we know from John Deere today, but we start to see this going hand in hand with the Industrial Revolution is the creation of equipment to farm more efficiently. And what does that mean? Well, that means we are going to have a dramatic population increase, especially in those Western countries. All right, remember, these Western countries that have industrialized first are going to be very, very wealthy. Going hand in hand with all of that is the creation of vaccinations. Okay, the smallpox vaccine is going to be created in the late 1700s. Weird story with the smallpox vaccine. The guy literally gave himself smallpox to test whether or not it worked. Super weird stuff, guys. Okay, but it's not just smallpox. People are starting to, there's more and more people. All right. Other things that are going to start being created: the discovery of bacteria and sanitation. So prior to period 3, people believed in something called the 4 humors. All right, that there were 4 components of your body that worked hand in hand together. And if one of them was sick, you could die. If more than one was sick, you could. It was all a bunch of like, crazy quack doctor BS. But in period 3, hand in hand with the Industrial Revolution, you're going to start to see the discovery of bacteria. All right. People are going to start to realize that, hey, maybe instead of dumping our human feces in the street, we should start putting it in something like sanitation, in sewage, and taking our, typhoid infested poop and getting it away from where people actually live. I know it's crazy to think about, but it's not until period 3 that people start to actually put 2 and 2 together and start creating these inventions that actually help people, okay? So the discovery of both bacteria and sanitation is going to allow the prevention of bacteria and viral infection. So you'll start to see, you'll start to see that these awful, awful diseases, people are still dying of them, but they're still dying of them in less amounts, all right? You also have the invention of bleach, all right, and soap. And we know that keeping clean generally keeps viruses away. That's why we're all dousing ourselves in hand sanitizer every day, because we're trying to keep the COVID away, all right? So this good stuff is really important because this is really, really helping this population growth. And when you have a lot of people in a society, all right, you have the ability to pay people low amounts of money because you have a lot of people who are going to be fighting over jobs. So I want you to keep that in mind as we continue on with this. So when you have huge amounts of people in Europe, all right, when you have huge amounts of people in Europe that are desperate for jobs, they're going to be willing to take jobs for low prices, as we talked a lot in Unit 5. All right, women and children being put in the factory and being paid almost nothing. But what happens if They realize that they have better opportunities in other places. All right. British peasants who are getting paid 20 cents an hour to work in factories in Manchester, England, can get on a boat and go to work in these factories in Columbus, Georgia, and make 25 cents an hour, just a little bit more. All right, what you're gonna start to see is that people will begin to migrate and search for work. You'll also see places that have not industrialized. All right, China, India, people will be leaving those places in search for work in these industrialized countries. And so for the first time in history, on an unprecedented scale, humans are going to migrate interregionally, okay? We're very, very interested in interregional. And what that means is kind of like someone who leaves Europe for North America, someone who leaves Africa for Europe, all right? Someone who leaves Australia for South America. It's not, someone who leaves New Jersey for Georgia, all right? Although that is important, and that is something that we'll be talking about a little bit briefly today. One thing you need to understand, guys, is that these migrants are going to tend to relocate to major cities. All right, where are these factories? All right, these mines, these railroads, where are they going to be starting? They're going to be in cities. And so you're going to see this process of migration is going to fuel the process of urbanization. So I know a lot of you who have taken AP Human Geography know what urbanization is, but for those of you who don't, it's kind of the process of people moving to cities, all right, cities growing, all right? So you're going to see a huge amount of immigration that's going to be funneling into Europe and the Americas. And that is mostly because these regions of the world are going to industrialize. There's going to be lots and lots of jobs in those factories, in those mines, on those railroads. Because these countries are going to become wealthier, they're also going to be using government money to build large-scale infrastructure. All right, so the British government will be funding huge building projects, right? Creating more factories, creating more railroads. And when you build these kind of large scale projects, you need people to build them. And over time, you're gonna want to pay them the least amount of money as possible, all right? And one way you're gonna be able to get away with that is by paying people from other countries, all right? Especially people from very poor countries. So what you'll see are these large building projects, factories, railroads taking place in the US, Australia, and other Western known areas. You need cheap labor, and where are you gonna find it? Well, you're gonna find it in other places that have not industrialized, where people are starving for work, okay? So one way you're gonna do it is you're going to hire desperate immigrants. And there are a lot of desperate immigrants in this time, okay? You're going to see Chinese, right, people from China who are fleeing rebellion, all right, who are fleeing the Boxer Rebellion, who are fleeing the Taiping Rebellion, trying to keep their families safe. And one way they're going to do it is to get on a boat and travel to the United States in search for work. You're also going to see Eastern Europeans fleeing those conflicts in the Balkans. All right, they're going to be doing this looking for jobs, and they're going to be willing to accept a job, even arduous and painful and hard, for an extremely low price, okay? Now, another one that I know many of you have heard of is the Irish potato famine, all right? This one I have a personal investment in, all right? My mom's last name was O'Connor, all right? My family came to the United States because of the Irish potato famine. One major demographic shift that actually goes hand in hand with the Columbian Exchange. All right, after the potato was introduced to Ireland in the 1750s, Ireland became sort of addicted to the potato and grew nothing except for the potato, which is bad. You don't want monoculture. So by the 1840s, during a blight, all right, during a really, really bad time in Ireland when the potato could no longer grow, much of the country starved to death, all right? Those who were smart enough to get on a boat did so and traveled to the United States and took very, very low paying jobs in factories. My ancestors, for example, all right? So like most migrants, these Irish escaped this potato famine and came to the United States. All right, and they brought with them their Irish heritage, their Irish culture, and their religion, Catholicism, which tended to be a problem, but that's a whole other story. But there's also a new kind of immigrant, okay? There's also the one that is seasonal, and that's because of the Industrial Revolution. Remember, we talked about all those cool tools being built during the Industrial Revolution, the telegraph, the steamships, all right? All of these things are going to assist migrants in the process of only working seasonally and then being able to return home, okay? So, whereas the Irish often left Ireland with no plans of ever coming back, the Japanese agricultural workers, all right, came to Peru and worked on the farms for maybe, a spring season and then went back to Japan. All right, Italians as well. You see a lot of Italians leaving Italy in the wintertime, going to Argentina, which was their summertime at that point, okay? Building these large scale wine factory or grape farms, and then returning. All right, you don't see this up in any process of human history until period 3. All right. Again, as I said, guys, before 1750 to 1900, before this period 3, once a migrant left their country, they often did not have the funds or ability to return home. Okay. So, guys, given that a lot of the work, this low wage work that migrants needed to accept, given that it was mostly really, really hard physical labor, what you begin to see is that the majority of migrants are indeed male. So what you're going to start seeing is you're going to see Irish males, Italian males, Japanese men leaving their home societies to go take these either seasonal jobs or to go work in these factories in New York City, raise money, and then bring the rest of their families. Okay. But what that means is when women are left behind, they're often having to take up new roles. So women are, now that their husbands or their fathers are now leaving their countries, they're often having to go work themselves in order to support their children or their families. And so you're going to start to see that women are starting, the role of women is starting to change a little bit. Okay. While many men did often return, especially those seasonal workers, the Italian men, the Japanese men who were working in agriculture in South America, sometimes they didn't necessarily return, but they sent enough money home in order to get the entire family to migrate. Okay, so what you start seeing is an Irish men coming to the United States, working in a factory for a year, raising money, sending it home, and then having their entire families join them. All right, and then they stay in the United States. They become part of the country. All right, but one thing that happens, and we're going to talk about this in just a little bit, is that when these ethnic groups, these Irish, these Italians, these Japanese, once they start coming to the United States or they start going to Great Britain, Australia, other places, they start to form something called ethnic enclaves. Now, we'll talk about what this is at the end of class, but make sure you write it down, okay? Now, there's a bunch of different type of labor, all right? I don't want you to get the sense that labor is, you can just get on a boat, go get a job, and things are great. Because up till this point, we've talked about free labor, right? Those Irish men and women who left their potato famine farms, they had the ability to make that choice, all right? Those Japanese men who came to Peru to work on those farms, they had that choice, the Italian men as well, all right? And that is called free labor. It's when individuals choose to leave home or their societies, their home cultures freely. So no one is putting a gun to their head and forcing them to, okay? Often this is because they're looking for better opportunities. They can't get a job at home or the job is paying too low. They've heard really good things about a different place, all right? And they want to take that opportunity to try to get a better life for their families. And that is free labor, and free labor is good, okay? I like this picture a lot because to me, it has a personal connection. All right. To me, I imagine my Irish ancestors coming to the United States on a boat overlooking the, Statue of Liberty and docking in Ellis Island. All right. That's free labor. That was a choice. But we're not always talking about choice in this class. There are many examples of non-voluntary labor. So you guys probably remember in period 2 when I told you all about indentured servitude. Well, it is probably no surprise to many of you that when the British started to realize they needed workers in other places, especially like Australia and New Zealand, they began to offer something that they just sort of recycled something that they had from period 2, and they did something called indentured servitude. All right. So what you'll see with indentured servitude is that the British, the Americans as well, offered the Chinese and Indian workers the opportunity to come to this country, work for 7 years, and then, of course, afterwards, either get some land or get citizenship or whatever it is. Slavery also, if you guys look at the entirety of period 3, 1750 to 1900, slavery still exists in period 3. All right, it exists for probably between 1750 and 1880. It finally ends in Brazil. Okay, another thing that the British and the Americans create is something called convict labor. All right, convict labor is going to begin in the 1800s, and essentially it's taking prisoners, oftentimes who've done very menial crimes, and putting them to work. All right, not paying them, but they're going to pay off their debt to society through work. Now, you've probably heard of Australia, major country, a major continent in the world today. I know you guys all know Australia because it's the continent that wants to kill you, all those harmful creatures there. But Australia actually starts out originally as a prisoner colony. All right, everyone that was originally sent to Australia was someone who was imprisoned in Great Britain, often because they had a debt that they couldn't pay off. So what you start to see is that these prisoners, instead of housed in private prisons, they're going to be forced to work for free in rock quarries, building railroads, on farms. All right, the American South had probably the worst convict labor in the entire world. All right, Georgia was notorious for convict labor. Pretty much all of the roads that were built in Georgia were done so through convict labor. Okay, you might be surprised to know this, but the Constitution says convict labor is okay. If you look at the 13th Amendment, which freed slaves, there's sort of a caveat for convict labor. All right, convict labor is going to continue all the way until the 20th century in the United States. All right, convict labor is pretty awful. Now, there were also migrations that were truly not voluntary, okay? Now, we have talked in great extent about this first one, the transatlantic and the Indian Ocean slave trades. That was not voluntary, all right? We talk about these as migrations, but I want you guys to make sure you understand that migrations are not always voluntary. Sure, my ancestors, it was voluntary, but the ancestors of, people who came over on the transatlantic slave trade, that was not a voluntary migration, okay? Other migrations that were not really voluntary, the Chinese indentured servants, all right? They came here, the Chinese, we'll talk about them in just a minute. They came here to build the Transcontinental Railroad. And they thought they would be able to stay here, but after they were finished, the United States forced them to go back. All right, you also see that Jamaica, Latin America, and Australia, semi-coerced labor. All right, Indians, indentured servants. Great Britain offered that indentured servant contract to these Indians to go help build infrastructure in Australia, South Africa, and many of the islands in the Caribbean. All right, you guys have probably heard of Mahatma Gandhi. Gandhi was an indentured servant. I believe he served in South Africa, okay? And as I said to you guys, convict labor. Britain has a whole country for convict labor. All right, if you have any Australian friends, if their ancestors have been in Australia for a long time, it's likely that they were convict labor. They were prisoners and they were sent there. So guys, I want you to make sure you understand that while migrations are usually a good thing, all right, it's good to have new people from new places with new cultures. Oftentimes in period 3, it was not voluntary. Now, this is an AP US history story, but I do want to give you let me give you a story. All right. These Chinese coolies. All right. Coolie is a derogatory term, so please do not use it today. However, you can use it in the context of history. Now, these Chinese coolies were brought over from China to build the Transcontinental Railroad. I don't know about you guys, but building a railroad doesn't sound like fun, because it's not. All right. Having to blow up mountains to put down those railroad wood things. I don't know what they're called. All right. It's a really terrible and awful job. All right. And these coolies are paid next to nothing. And when they're done, they're shipped back to China. But it's really unfortunate because these Chinese coolies work so hard at building something that's so important to the United States, the Transcontinental Railroad. Remember that manifest destiny idea, guys. All right. The United States, that creation of that railroad that traverses the entirety of the continent is so important. And I promise you, it could not have been built without these Chinese coolies. Now, in the beginning, I told you guys about something called an ethnic enclave. Now, if any one of you have ever been to New York, you might have been to Little Italy or Koreatown, Chinatown, Japantown, all right? Ethnic enclaves exist today in the 21st century, all right? You can go into Atlanta and go to Koreatown or Chinatown. But these ethnic enclaves actually start in period 3. So when people begin to migrate from China, Eastern Europe, India, Ireland, Italy, all those places, they tend to settle in cities, all right, where there's work, all right? Hashtag urbanization. But they're also going to start settling in groups, all right, in small enclaves, all right? So small little areas where they're surrounded by people like themselves, all right? So the Chinese people are all going to be living in neighborhoods with Chinese people. And it's gonna be one way that they're able to keep their home cultures alive, all right? A lot of these migrants aren't going to learn English, or their children will learn English, but they won't. And one way they're able to kind of survive in this new world is by surrounding themselves with people from home, all right? And we know that these ethnic enclaves are pretty good, all right? Over generations, these enclaves start to kind of form these fusions between the home culture and the host culture. And you see these, you know, wonderful new foods that are creations of like American food and Chinese food. And these ethnic enclaves are also really fun to visit today. All right, you can go to Atlanta and basically feel like you're in Seoul, South Korea. All right, and they exist today, but you have to understand that these ethnic enclaves are a way for people to keep their cultures alive. All right, and I think this is a really cool map. This was in 2011. Somebody created this map of New York City. All right, so the ethnic enclaves from period 3 are probably a little bit different from today, but you still see these groups of people that are still living together. All right, you still have, let's see, Little Italy. You still have Little Italy. All right, you still have kind of Chinatown, but you also have new groups of people. All right, you have you know, new groups of migrants in the 21st century, and I think this is a really cool map because again, everything in that white is New York City, but look at all the different ethnic groups and all the cool stuff that they have brought and contributed to people here. So guys, this is my final slide for you, but you don't have to write all of this stuff, but I do need you guys to understand where all these people are coming from, okay? 32 million people are leaving Europe for North America. And I guarantee that that a good majority of you guys in this classroom have ancestors that came from Europe or came from China, came from Korea, Japan. But people aren't just coming to, you know, North America. They're going to South America. They're going to Africa. They're leaving Africa, all right? They're moving into Southeast Asia. Europeans are going to Australia. Indians are going all over the world, all right? And this is all because of how the Industrial Revolution makes the world interconnected, okay? The other thing is, guys, is that a lot of these countries that have been imperialized by a global empire, they're gonna go back to these, so let me give you an example. Great Britain has imperialized India, all right? Now I want you guys to look at this map. There's a huge amount of Indians that are gonna go back to Great Britain because of that connection of imperialism, all right? You're gonna see the same thing, let's see, you're going to see the same thing with a lot of other imperialized states. All right, a lot of Western Africans here will go to France because of that imperial connection. All right, you'll also see that a lot of Chinese will go to other places in Europe because of that imperial connection. So please make sure you keep that in mind, okay? All right, guys. So as usual, if you miss class, please send me an email and I'll let you know your missed assignments. Be working on that period 3 review guide and get ready for your test because it's going to be a good one. Okay. So proud of you guys. You're doing awesome. And I hope you enjoyed period 3 as much as I enjoyed teaching it. I will see you guys later.